Hey, everybody, can you feel it? Can you start to feel the excitement, the electricity? Because the Eagles' playoff game is getting closer and closer. And now we're going to find out what this Eagles team that rolled through the regular season and compiled all these incredible stats is all about in the second season. We're ready to talk some playoff football on this edition of Gunn On One.
This is Sal Palantonio from ESPN.
I'm Brandon Graham.
Lane Johnson here.
This is the magnificent DJ Jazzy Jeffy.
This is Donovan McNabb.
This is Chris Long.
This is Mark Sumoff, the TV voice of the 76ers on NBC Sports Philadelphia.
This is Eagles Hall of Fame quarterback Ron Jaworski.
Hello, I'm Jay Wright, head coach of Villanova basketball.
Hey, I'm Brian Westbrook, and you're listening to the Gunn On One podcast.
And what's happening? This is your blessed boy, Brian Dawkins, Hall of Famer, and you're locked in to Gunn On One.
You are locked in to the Gunn On One.
Gunn On One.
Gunn On One.
You are locked on to Gunn On One.
I've been on the air for 25 years, but I could not wait to be on Gunn On One with my man, Derrick Gunn.
ESPN bracketologist Joe Lunardi telling you to stay locked on to Gunn On One. It is a number one seed.
Hey, we welcome you back to this edition of Gunn On One. It is powered by the JAKIB Sports Media YouTube machine. I'm Derrick Gunn, and of course, the Eagles. Well-rested Eagles, I might add. First round bye, got some bodies healed up. The quarterback, from what we're being told, is good to go. So for this playoff edition, I brought in a guy I've known a long time, a guy I consider a friend as well as a colleague. He is the Jeff McLane, the Eagles beat writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer and, of course, Inquirer.com. Jeff, how you been, my man?
Gunner, what's up? Long time no talk.
I know, man. It's been a while. And I have to ask you this because I love asking people in our business this question periodically. And you've been doing this a long time. So I have to ask you this to start. When you're preparing for a big game, and I mean writing or broadcasting or whatever the case may be, at what point of a week do you just get tired of writing about what's to come and talking about what's to come?
Well, and you know what? In this case, too, you mentioned the bye week. So you got 2 weeks of talking about the same, obviously not the same opponent because we didn't find out until Sunday that the Eagles are going to play the Giants, but you're just kind of waiting for this to happen. And really, honestly, with this team, and I'm not sure if you felt this way, it seems like we've been waiting for this moment ever since they clinched in early December against the Giants. And I almost felt like, and I think there was a player who kind of mentioned that after the game, after the season when they kind of had that little slide, they obviously got the number one seed. So at that point, he could say, yeah, I felt like, there was a lull in the locker room, or at least in terms of how we performed on the field in those last four games, because we clinched it. We felt like a number one seed was a foregone conclusion. It ended up not being the case until the final game. You had to bring a less than 100% Jalen Hurts pretty much back a little bit earlier. So it feels like with this team, we've just been waiting for this moment for so long. And so, I'm ready to kind of, I think I got one more story to write tomorrow, and then I'm ready to go. And the next thing I have to write about will be about the actual game.
All right. So I got to ask you this then. Let's start with the mass unit reports, because that's all everybody wants to talk about is Jalen Hurts. Now, you're there every day. From what you've been able to see, and obviously it's on a limited basis because teams are so secretive, they're not going to give a whole lot away. But from what you've been able to see, people you talk to in the locker room, in the organization, your thoughts on where Jalen Hurts is right now physically?
I don't think he's 100%, but I think in terms of what the playbook will allow, he's 100%, meaning that they're going to do everything. They're not going to hold back on the +1 run plays in which he's involved, the zone reads, the RPOs. If they have to sneak them, they're going to sneak them. If they have to call a draw and they feel it's something that's going to score big against the Giants, they're going to call it. So that's, to me, the main thing. I think he's a lot better than he was 2 weeks ago. He did not throw last week on the Thursday practice we went to. Friday, he threw a little bit more. Now, we don't see, as you know, all of practice on Tuesday was a walkthrough, so we can't go at all. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, we can just go to the individual part. But he seemed fine. He was doing pretty much everything that you'd expect him to do. The arm seemed fine. Is that anywhere close to what, how he'll need to throw, how he'll need to be on Saturday in terms of throwing the ball. Even when they have these simulated scrimmages or they have kind of competitive periods, it's not the same as being out there and playing. So, there's a little bit of concern about how, to me, people are more concerned about, I'm concerned about, if you're the Eagles, you're concerned about him getting hit on that shoulder and hurting himself, et cetera. Yes, absolutely. But there has to be as much concern about how he's going to throw it with the shoulder. If he can't throw it the way he had prior to the injury, then that's an issue.
Isn't that somewhat of a red flag, though? Because you said he didn't throw last Thursday. He threw on a limited basis on a Friday. But when you consider they kept him out of 2 games and the time frame from which he injured that shoulder to where he is right now, and you, like I said, I respect your opinion 100%. You're there every day. And you mentioned the word concern. Now, obviously, they've got to test it thoroughly to find out what he can and cannot do if there are any limitations. But is that a bigger concern maybe than we're thinking about here with this guy?
I mean, here's why I'll say it's a concern and why I used the word concern, because, again, the last time we saw him was in the game against the Giants.
Yep.
They admitted after the game, he admitted after the game how much pain he had played through and how sore he was even afterwards. So, look, they put it right out there. Now, I don't know, was that gamesmanship in terms of making the Giants or whoever they were going to play think that this guy is not going to be near 100%? No, I don't think so, because it happened right after the game. So that's why I have some concern. And the other concern is what I've heard. Yeah, I mean, this is probably, is he going to be 100%? No. From my understanding, he's not going to be 100%. You're going to be able to run the game plan. You're going to be able to go as deep as you want into the playbook, but that doesn't mean it's going to be the Jalen Hurts again in terms of how he threw the ball pre-injury and how he ran the ball pre-injury. So, yes, that's where the concern is. Jalen Hurts, because if you remember in the game back against season finale against the Giants, you were pretty well in the first half. A couple there were jump balls that AJ won. Second half, 7 of 18 for 87 yards and an interception. Now, the interception wasn't about the throwing; it was more about a bad decision that he made. But some of the other throws were leaky. So we've yet to really see him throw it the way he was throwing it prior to the injury in Chicago.
Okay, man, I can't wait to see which Jalen Hurts shows up on the field on Saturday night. All right, what about Lane Johnson? All right, we know he's going to have the surgery when the season is all said and done. I think this dude is as tough as anybody who plays in the National Football League. 85% of Lane Johnson is better than the other option on the right side of the field. From what you've seen of Lane Johnson, is he good enough? Is he where he should be at this stage, considering the type of injury he has?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Gunner. 85% of Lane is probably better than most right tackles in the league, let alone on his own team. So, because he allows the Eagles to put him out there on the island. They don't have to worry about sending another player out there to help him in pass pro. And Jalen doesn't have to worry about that, for the most part. Yeah, there'll be a couple pressures here and there. So having Lane in there is fine. But your question is he going to be the Lane that we know? He's got something. He had to miss 2 games because of it.
Yep.
Torn groin or abdomen or abductor, whatever you want to call it. That's going to need surgery. Now, that's in talking to people that know a little bit about that injury and also the playing on it. You and I know if you play in the offensive line, you're using your core a lot.
Yes.
So there's going to be pain. As you said, Lane, I mean, we know what Lane has played through. You and I probably know more than what a lot of people know because he doesn't want to talk about it a lot.
No.
So I'm not going to put that out there, but Lane plays through a lot, and he'll be able to play through this, and he'll still be, I think, effective enough. And maybe they'll have to do a couple of things that normally they wouldn't do to help him out. But yeah, it's certainly a little bit of a concern. It's concern number 2 for me in terms of the injuries headed into this game.
Obviously, Avonte Maddox won't play in this game, but I saw various reports. He's at least out there on the field getting some kind of workout in. What's your best guesstimate for his return? Do you think we'll even see him again this season?
I think that was the reason why the Eagles didn't place him on IR, because
Okay.
they kept him on the roster, the 53-man roster, for a reason. So they're estimating there's a chance that he can return.
Yep.
I guess worst case scenario for the Super Bowl, maybe there's a possibility next week. He didn't practice all week, wasn't doing anything. That doesn't mean he can't come back and be ready for the NFC Championship if they get there. But my guess is it'll probably be one of those things, touch and go next week, game time decision, and then you got the 2 weeks in between the Super Bowl. They probably believe that he could play by then.
You know, set aside all the individual stats and collective stats this team put together this year. The fact that they're as healthy as they are compared to other teams in the NFL, I think that's phenomenal. I'm just sitting here shocked that this team is the healthiest team, a team that compiled one of the best records in the league, a team that racked up all these unbelievable stats, that they're as healthy as they are. Doesn't that seem a little out of the norm for you, for a team that at this stage of a season?
Yeah, and I remember talking with you before about this and how the Eagles had kind of changed everything in terms of how they handle practices, how they handle the soft tissue injuries and bringing guys back. And something is working, because as you mentioned, they're probably the healthiest team, even though we talked about three of the key guys that have been hurt, and there have been a few more injuries down the stretch. CJ Gardner-Johnson missed 5 games. Dallas Goedert missed 5 games. Those are key players. But if you have to look at the rest of the league, and those teams have a lot more of guys on the infirmary than the Eagles have had. And again, at this point in the season, and I mean, credit to Howie Roseman and the medical staff that he's put together, and the adjustments they've made to the practice schedule. They don't ever practice really on Wednesdays anymore. Wednesdays when the game is on Sunday. And these guys are fresh. They're ready to go. And that's a key component when you think about playing into January. And 2017, a team that won the Super Bowl, we know how many guys were missing at the end of that season. Now, they didn't have as many adjusted games lost to injury as they did in 2018, 19, 20. That's when the injury issue became a major problem for this organization. That's when they had to kind of change. They were going through the process of changing things, but there were a lot of bumps in that road. That team was missing far more guys that were instrumental to their success prior. So just comparing it to that, this team is in a better spot.
So here we are closing in on round 3 between the Eagles and the Giants. And I have to ask you this. Going into a game like this between two opponents that know each other very well, which would you prefer? A well-rested team like the Eagles, or a team that's got that momentum going right now like the Giants? They're coming in on a short week for sure, but they got that momentum. They got their revenge against the Vikings. And right now, these I call them the junkyard dogs, because they're not overly talented when you look at names, but they're still standing, and they're coming here with the same mindset. Hey, we beat the Vikings. We got a good shot to do the same thing in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Momentum in the NFL is a real thing.
Yeah.
That being said, you want that first round bye. Like, you don't want to have to play that game. And the Eagles not only were able to rest guys, they were able to kind of spend more time in terms of game planning. The Giants are going to have one less day than they normally do to turn around before another game. And so if you're just asking me strictly about that, no, clearly you want to have the bye. Yeah, maybe they are a little sluggish coming out because you haven't played in a little while. Yeah. But I think that narrative is sometimes overblown. The Eagles are where they want to be. You want to be the number 1 seed.
All right. Since they ran all over the Giants back in Week 14 for 253 yards, the running game has been lacking something. They struggled against Chicago, against New Orleans, against Dallas. I throw that last Giants game out the window because it was the Eagles front runners playing the JV squad. Have you noticed any kinks in the armor in terms of their running game? I mean, a running game that's basically spoiled us for most of this season.
Well, I mean, the main component that was missing was Jalen Hurts. Certainly in Dallas, certainly against the Saints, and for part of the Chicago game. If you're going to tell me, okay, Jalen was playing that game, they ran him a lot, he was involved. The Chicago really sold out to stop that run game and stop him, and that's why they had so much success in the air. That's why they kept throwing the ball, because they were crowding the box to stop Jalen. So that's been the key to this offense all year. I mean, it's really Jalen's +1 factor. If he's effective running the ball, then Miles Sanders is effective running the ball because there's not as many guys keyed on him.
Yeah.
If they're successful running the ball on the ground, then teams have to do more to stop the ground game, and therefore the Eagles can pass the ball, and they have the passing weapons to do so because advantages on the outside, advantages in the middle with Dallas Goedert, and also with Jalen Hurts and the way that he has thrown the ball this year. So that's been the key, and that was the major part to me that was missing against the Cowboys, against the Saints, and then also against the Giants in the last game because Jalen didn't have any calls that were designed for him.
Right.
So that was, that's why they didn't run him well in those 3 games for the most part. Miles had a little knee thing that was bothering him as well, and then you're also missing Lane. So those 3 components played a factor in the run game not being as successful.
In a game like this, does Miles need to touch the ball more than 17, 18 times a game, which is about his average for the most part?
I think it depends. It depends how the game plays out, right? I don't think again, I'm not a huge run the ball early guy, whatever it is. I mean, sure, if they're playing you a certain way, then yeah, you'll run it, you'll play it that way. But I think they're gonna come out throwing it. I think they're gonna come out and establish Jalen in the run game a few times. Miles to get a few carries there, and then they want to play from ahead. And then if they play from ahead, that's when you'll see Miles getting more carries. But I don't think it's going to be a thing where they're just going to, hand it off to Miles, get Jalen under center, hand it off to Miles, and 4 yards in a cloud of dust. No, I don't think that's going to be the case. And I know people have problems with that, but for the most part, the offense as they've run it has been very successful this year.
Man, don't tell me the Eagles are going to come out throwing the ball out of the gate. I mean, seriously, we've seen that in recent games. It's been like 3 and outs, couple of sacks. And now the Giants have Adoree Jackson back in the back end of the defense. Xavier McKinney's back for them as well. Yeah. Please tell me they're not going to come out throwing the football.
I think they're going to favor throwing the football. Yeah, I mean, there'll be RPOs. I mean, there'll be read option plays in there for Jalen. Maybe they'll hand it off. Those RPOs, the Eagles have been the most successful team in the NFL running RPOs. So it depends how he reads it. If they're going to try and take away the run, then he's going to throw it. And if they're going to try and take him away, then maybe he'll hand it off to Miles. There may be a few, Miles straight ahead, hand off to him, runs thrown in there. But they're going to play the way the defense is going to play them. And it'll be interesting to see how the Giants do so. We all know Wink Martindale loves the blitz.
Yep.
He didn't do it last week against the Vikings.
Nope.
But I think he's still going to do it against Philly. Ooh. And you blitz, that's fine and all, but you can die. You may live by the blitz, or you can die by the blitz as well. And if the Eagles have the right answers against the blitz, they could really, and they did in that first game against the Giants, and they killed them down the field with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown against cover 1 on the outside. If he goes blitz heavy and Eagles have the answers, I mean, it could be to me the same result in terms of what the Eagles do offensively in points and yards.
Well, the Giants are a lot healthier defensively than they were the first time the Eagles saw them week number 14. But I look at what the Vikings tight end T.J. Hockenson did against them. I think this could be a huge game for Dallas Goedert.
Right. And Dallas didn't play in that, and Dallas didn't play in that game.
Exactly. I think this could be huge for the tight ends in this game.
I just wrote that today, Gunner. You and I are on the same wavelength. Yeah,
right
we're
here,
seeing
man.
Seeing it right. I know, man. Yeah, so Xavier McKinney's back and Adoree Jackson's back. But I still feel like they have advantages in that secondary. The Eagles against almost any team, but I think against the Giants will also have Leonard Williams back. He didn't play in that first game, and you pair him up with Dexter Lawrence. That's a formidable twosome inside. Eagles have a good offensive line, though. I think they'll be able to kind of offset a little bit of their effectiveness. And I agree with you. I mean, look, Jalen has really leaned heavy on his receivers.
Yeah.
There was a period there where maybe it was we got to get the ball more to Dallas, and they were doing so. But this screams Dallas Goedert. At least 10 targets, 8 catches, 100 yards. I just feel like there's an opportunity really there in the middle of the field.
I see this dude Daniel Jones now, and he didn't do it a lot of the season, but he ran the ball so effectively against Minnesota, and that was huge in terms of them loosening up an already porous Vikings defense. And this Eagles pass rush has been so fierce all season. Do the Eagles have to be more disciplined in terms of how they attack Daniel Jones? You can not just rushing to rush at him, but be more disciplined, maybe rushing to a point than stopping to try to keep him in a corral, more so than all out just coming after him.
Yeah, because again, like Jalen Hurts, there's a +1 factor. Now he's not as dynamic on the ground as Jalen, and doesn't break as many tackles, but he can get you 5, 6, 7, 8 yards if he keeps it. And the Eagles practice against it, so they know what's going to happen if they run those zone replays. But with Saquon Barkley, a healthy Saquon Barkley, because that's another factor that you need to point out in terms of the first game. Saquon played, but he wasn't he was hurt. He was coming off an injury, and it was touch and go whether he was going to play in that game. He ended up playing, but they really, as you mentioned, to use your word, corralled him in that game. And Daniel Jones, they never really had an opportunity to run it. I think they ran a zone replay once or twice, and the Eagles are right there on top of it. But yeah, it does restrict you in terms of pinning your ears back, because you got to account for that quarterback, and he knows how to run it. I mean, he knows how to get enough yards when he needs to, and he knows how to scramble if the Eagles are going to play deep zones, right? If they're going to play deep zones and they're not looking back, he's going to run and take off for first downs.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Saquon, because tell me if this is strange or not. Now, we know he's a phenomenal runner. He's healthier this year than he has been the last couple of years. He only had 9 carries against Minnesota, but he busted him for a 28-yard touchdown run. I'm more concerned about Saquon floating out of the backfield in one-on-one situations than I am him running the football in open space, because as good of a runner as he is, that dude is lethal in open space when he's catching passes on those short crossing routes in shallow coverage.
That was a big part of the Vikings, the Giants win over the Vikings, because I think he had like 5 catches for like 6-7 yards, and each one was coming at 10 to 12 yards a clip. And it was every time they played deep zone, they take away the receivers, Daniel Jones would just dump it to Saquon, and he'd pick up a first down. So that is an area that the Eagles are going to need to be really conscious of. I mean, the guy can run it. We all know that. The question is, how often is Jonathan Gannon going to use that 5-man front? If he uses it a lot, that can keep him in check, but then that leaves you a little bit light on the back end. So it's going to be kind of a give and take in numbers in terms of how Jonathan wants to play it. But Saquon as a receiver can burn you, especially when really, honestly, you look at that offensive side of the ball in terms of their skill position players. They don't have a lot of guys that really kind of scare you. And that's why when I look at how well Daniel Jones and that offense performed against the Vikings, that's not a really great defense. And the Eagles have a very good defense. They have a really good pass rush. They have good cornerbacks. They have CJ Gardner-Johnson playing both in the slot. They seem okay at safety. I'm always a little bit worried about their safety spot, especially now that CJ's playing more in the slot. So that could be an area where the Giants may have an opportunity to push the ball down the field. But this is a better defense than the one the Giants played last week.
No question. I go back to that Saints game, and I look at how methodical they were offensively in terms of controlling the clock and keeping that Eagles offense off the field, even though Jalen Hurts didn't play in that game. Saints held the ball for 37 minutes, and it worked to their favor. Do you see the Giants trying to take a similar approach because they don't have the firepower that the Eagles do?
Yeah, I do. You just mentioned what the Saints did. That Washington did it with success as well. And Gannon's willing to he wants teams to run the ball. To him, that's a win because there's no chance of an explosive play through the air. You're going to get more explosive plays through the air than on the ground. And then teams typically aren't that patient. They're not going to wait it out. But we saw the Giants do that last week. They had 12-play drive. I think they had an 18-play or 20-play drive, I think, at one point. They had long drives. So they're willing to play it that way. So it's on Jonathan Gannon he's gonna have to be a little more aggressive, I think, in terms of stopping that run, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're keeping that offense, the Eagles offense, off the field again and allowing the Giants to kind of shorten the game basically for them, because that gives the Eagles less possession, gives them that's what you want, because the Eagles have a much more explosive offense. So I think Jonathan's got to do a little bit more to stop the run.
I don't know, Jeff. Do you trust Gannon? Because every time, and again, his defense has put up incredible numbers. They are awesome defense. But do you trust him? Because a lot of times I sit back going, what's he doing here? Why are his guys playing 7 to 10 yards off the ball? Why are they calling this at this particular time? It's easy for us as lounge chair quarterbacks to sit back and make these observations, but you have a better feel for it because you're there. Do you thoroughly trust Jonathan Gannon?
I almost don't trust any defensive coordinator nowadays in the NFL because it's such a tough job against these quarterbacks and the way everything is steered towards the offense. So, like, I look at it from a different perspective because I see, and I'm sure you do when you watch another game, you're like, oh, what's this defensive coordinator doing? Gannon is better than this guy. So that's the way I look at it. It's just you're not going to have the days of like Buddy Ryan and Bud Carson because defenses were allowed to do so much more than they could hit the quarterbacks, they could grab guys, grab receivers. You just can't do that as much anymore. And it's just kind of a game you have to play just to kind of keep things in front of you, especially when you have a really good offense that you know is going to score points. Yep. And that's basically what this team's about. This is an offensive team, and Jonathan is playing his defense to suit the Eagles offense. Okay. That's what they want, right? Okay. And it's been effective this year. Yeah. Do I think those numbers are a little bit that they lie a little bit in terms of making it seem like it's better than? Yeah, I do think that's the case because I think the offense plays a big role in how effective that defense has been. But Jonathan's just doing what Nick wants in terms of, hey, if we get ahead, we're going to play off. Right, we don't want to give up the big plays. We don't want to allow them back in the games.
Yeah.
My issues with Jonathan on occasion, it's not scheme. No scheme is perfect.
Right.
The scheme is not the problem. You may not like the way it looks aesthetically. I get that, but it's a scheme that a lot of guys in this league run. Vic Fangio, when he runs it, it looks extremely aggressive.
Yeah.
It's to me sometimes John has bad calls, or he doesn't. When things start to get stale, he doesn't mix things up a little bit, and that to me is sometimes his issue. And I don't think it's going to hurt him against the Giants and Daniel Jones, but the issue is then as you move forward against the big guns, and then if you get to the Super Bowl, and look, at that point all bets are off. But and when you're Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, any defensive coordinator is going to look bad trying to stop him. But he's yet to have that signature kind of game. Aside from the Minnesota game, that was his best game earlier in the year. I know Kirk Cousins isn't what you'd call like an elite quarterback, but he's a really good quarterback, and they shut down Justin Jefferson. They had a game plan that was effective, that totally took him out of the game, and that defense really, really corralled that offense. So to me, but I'm still waiting for Jonathan to kind of say, okay, I've divided a game plan to take this person, great quarterback, out, and he's yet to kind of deliver that yet.
Let's go to the other coordinator because you touched on something earlier, and I had made notes of this, and I've been talking about it on our show Sports Take that we do daily, is the fact that I was shocked Wink Martindale called off the blitz against the Vikings. For a guy who blitzes 42% of the time, basically they decided to drop more people back in coverage because they are healthier. Like you said, you got Leonard Williams back, Adoree Jackson, Xavier McKinney. You said earlier that you felt that he was going to come after Jalen Hurts.
I do.
I agree with you, but I would not be shocked if he decided it's better to flood the zones and try to keep the likes of A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and those guys in front of them more so than being that riverboat gambler trying to disrupt Jalen to get rid of the ball a lot quicker than he wants to. It's such an intriguing scenario in terms of what exactly is this Wink Martindale guy going to do?
I think part of the reason why he played that way against Cousins is Cousins is a renowned check down guy. He won't push it a lot of times. You're like, okay, we'll take that. We'll just tackle you. Jalen hasn't been that guy. The blitz, when they tried to blitz Jalen in the first game, it didn't work. And after that, all bets were off. He just killed him. Second game, I mean, they blitzed the crap out of him 67% of the time, especially when they figured out that he wasn't going to run the ball.
Right.
And he struggled, especially the more the game went on.
Right.
So I think he's going to go back to that. It's his bread and butter. Jalen's had kind of up and down. mixed results against the blitz this year.
Yep.
Kind of struggled for a stretch there. If you recall the Cardinals game, they kind of seemed to have a key on him, but then they figured out things and he was doing great against the blitz. And then there was a little bit of a lull at certain points. And then clearly in this last game, but that wasn't the Jalen Hurts that we know. There was no +1 factor in it. They couldn't really do a lot and really restricted them in terms of what kind of variety they were bringing to the offense. So I just think Wink's going to try and throw it at him until it doesn't work. And then if it doesn't work, then I'll go back to whatever, go to something different. But the issue with that is, and I agree with you, I mean, you have to be wary of those guys down the field. If you blitz too much, you're leaving your corners alone with no help over the top. And we all know A.J. Brown's going to win a bunch of them, and so is Devontae Smith.
When I look at the Brian Daboll offense, especially now, he's doing a lot of the same things he did with Buffalo, with a lot more talent in Buffalo. He's a gadget guy. He likes these plays of deception. He likes these misdirection plays. I was talking to Jordan Renan, who we know, who worked in Philadelphia. Now he's covering the Giants up in New York. And he was talking about how shocked he was in terms of how many gadget plays that Daboll threw at the Vikings defense. You always have to prepare for the unknown, but this is a guy who's had a good measure of success with these gadget plays. And do you think he'll throw the kitchen sink at this Eagles defense? Because the Eagles defense, there's very few flaws in that defense.
Yeah, sometimes you tend to see that in the postseason from some teams, but sometimes I feel like that's like act of desperation.
Okay.
If you look at the Eagles offense, have they really run any what you'd call trick plays?
Not really.
They haven't had to,
no.
But they don't need to because they're putting up 400 yards and 30 points a game. So I think when you're looking at the Giants, though, they have to because they don't have much in terms of receivers,
right?
Tight ends. So we got to mix things up and. I would imagine that he does a little more of that against the Eagles, and they have to be prepared for that. And look, those types of plays can call them whatever you want to call them. The Eagles may have won a Super Bowl because of trick play. I mean, so that's you got to be prepared for them, and they're still part of the game. They're still part of the game. And I wouldn't be surprised. I agree with you.
Darius Slay. A lot of people have talked about how it appears he's tailed off in the last 6-7 games. You have a chance to talk to him on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of you guys have asked him that question. Do you agree or disagree with that, number one? And number two, how does he respond to that criticism?
I mean, I think it's fair to look at the numbers and then maybe, anecdotally some of the plays that he's given up down the field and say, okay, this isn't the Darius Slay we saw at the beginning of the season. He was pretty much dominant. So I think that's fair to say. I'm not really worried about him. Especially in this game, I don't think that there's a guy that is really going to get the better of him.
No.
The fact that some of those catches that he gave up came against guys that just weren't super duper great, that was a little bit of a concern to me. They were in man coverage. I think sometimes people who watch the games at home don't really understand the call and what he's required to do. I mean, obviously that 3rd and 30 play. People blamed him for it. I don't know what they expected him to do, not run the play that was called. So I don't make a big deal about it. Slay's a pretty prideful guy. I think he's really good at what he does. Is he a lockdown type of follow receiver or top guy anymore? No, he's not that. But you have James Bradbury on the other side. You don't really need him to be that guy.
Right.
And I think in this game, certainly you don't need him to be that guy.
Now that CJ's back, you like how they used him the last game where they're dropping him down to play that slot corner. And obviously they have a lot of trust in the Reed Blankenship on the backside.
Yeah. CJ looked great in that last game, I thought.
Yeah,
he looked
did.
as physical as he did all season. It might have been his best game. He was tackling great. That's a position he's played for many, many years. He knows it well. I expect them to go back to Avonte Maddox when he gets healthy, but because again, Reed's fine. But he's a young kid. I mean, you can definitely exploit him in the back if you want to. And I think having CJ and Marcus back there makes more sense than Reed and Marcus, because Marcus is sometimes susceptible as well. But I think when CJ's a slot, he's one of the best slots in the NFL.
All right, final question to you, because I've taken up enough of your time. How do you see this game playing itself out?
Yeah, I know there's this narrative out there that the Giants are coming in with momentum and that, the way they played in the season finale against the Eagles, the way the Eagles have played in the last 4 games, that this is, a real tests for the Eagles, and certainly there are reasons that we've mentioned several times to think that the Giants have a better shot than they did in early December. The fact they got two of the guys back from the secondary, the fact that they got Leonard Williams back, the fact that Saquon Barkley looks like he's closer to 100%. But I think the Eagles too have things in their favor as well. They didn't have Dallas Goedert in that first game, and the key thing in terms of looking at the regression is that Jalen Hurts just was not either playing or being Jalen Hurts. That is the key factor here. If he's close to the Jalen Hurts that we know, I think the Eagles win comfortably.
Okay.
More than 10. I think they cover.
Woo!
If Jalen isn't, and I think that's probably why you've seen the number dip. Was it 8.5 and now 7.5? I think at one point it was 7.
Yeah,
so
I think it's really 7.5 right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they know what he is, and quite frankly, I don't. A lot of us don't know, but from what I'm hearing, they expect him to be good enough for them to run the playbook full.
Yep.
So if you got Jalen Hurts running the ball and he's able to get freaky, as he likes to say,
yeah,
I like the Eagles, and I like them pretty comfortable. Okay.
Hey, man, I always appreciate your insight and your honesty. Thank you for taking the time to be on Gun on One, man. Always appreciate your perspectives.
Absolutely. Anytime, Gunner.
All right. That's going to wrap up this edition of Gun on One. It is powered by the JAKIB Sports Media YouTube machine. For my man, my friend, my colleague, Jeff McLane. Hey, read his stuff. Philadelphia Inquirer, Inquirer.com. I've known him for a long time. I read his stuff every chance I get. One of the most insightful people that you could possibly follow when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles. So until next time, what I tell you each and every week, hey, stay blessed out there, but more importantly, be a blessing to each and every person you encounter daily. So long, everybody.